The stories you are about to hear are true. Some names and locations have been changed at the author's discretion. Welcome to Uncle Josh's True Scary Stories.
Daddy's cologne. In January 2000, we lost my dad due to a doctor's error during surgery. As we were all very close to him, this hit us all particularly hard. I decided to move back home with my mom, and I was 24 at the time, just to be with her and take care of her. I've been with her ever since. It has now been nearly 7 years since his death. Before my dad died, I didn't believe in anything paranormal. I believed in what I learned at church, but I did not believe in ghosts or hauntings, even though I had experienced a few strange things myself. I brushed them all off as weird phenomenon, but nothing to concern myself with, and certainly nothing to change my views. That changed in spring of 2005. When my dad passed away, we began having trouble with people messing around the house. There were a few things stolen from my dad's work building, and there were 3 batteries stolen right from the vehicles while Mom and I watched out a window after placing a frantic phone call to the police. The police didn't show up until some time later, and by then, the burglars were gone. Occurrences of this nature would happen time and time again. In spring 2005, I was up late one night, 1 a.m. or maybe even later, I can't remember. I was studying for finals in my bedroom. Everything was quiet and dark. The only light on in the house was in my bedroom. We live in a very rural area, so when it gets dark and quiet, it really gets dark and quiet. I was engrossed in my studying when my dogs began barking. I sighed, realizing that someone was probably out there, but there was really nothing I could actually do about it since we lived so far from a police station. They had already stolen most everything of any value, and they had never tried to get in the house before, so I just went back to studying. I had become engrossed in my studying to the point that I didn't even really notice the dogs barking anymore, when suddenly my bedroom filled with an overwhelming scent of my dad's cologne. But it wasn't just the smell of the cologne. You know how different perfumes and colognes smell different on different people because of differing body chemistries? Want me to say different again? This was my dad wearing the cologne. I looked up, fully expecting to see him, but nothing was there. The scent was getting stronger and stronger. It was then that I noticed the urgent pitch of the dogs barking and growling, and the rustling coming from outside and underneath my bedroom window. There was someone out there. Suddenly, Daddy's scent centered at the window beside the bed where I was working, and seemed to become malevolent. Don't ask me how I know this, I just do. It's like the air seemed to crackle. It was then that I heard someone running away breakneck from the house without even bothering to try to be quiet. The atmosphere in the room suddenly went from malevolent to peaceful, and Daddy's scent lingered for a moment and then was gone. I'm not sure how I feel about it, but I can't deny it. I would like to think that he's still here, watching over those he loves. It made me feel very safe and taken care of. Not once did I feel one bit of fear over the scent of my daddy's cologne in my room. It followed me. When I was about 17, I lived with my then-boyfriend. I'll call him Sam. Sam had told me after I started living with him that his house was haunted. To be honest, I thought he was just effing with me. I was and still am a firm believer in the paranormal. I wasn't there a week and weird stuff started to happen. At first it was things not being where you left them, seeing things from the corner of your eye, and so on. It only got worse from there. This thing would breathe right beside you, as if letting you know it was there. The last week I was there was one of the scariest moments of my life. Me and Sam were watching movies in his room, which was at the end of a long hallway. Sam asked if I could grab some drinks from the kitchen on the other end of the house. I walked to the kitchen with no problems. Both drinks in hand, I'm walking back to Sam's room, and I get this feeling that I should look behind me. What I saw behind me scared the S out of me. It was a tall black shape, pitch black, not see-through, just black. It was almost a human-like thing. I'm 5'11", and it was much taller than me, maybe 6'4". From what I could tell, it didn't have the lower half of its legs. Both drinks hit the floor, and I ran like hell back to Sam's room. I jumped right onto Sam, freaking out, and told him there was something in the house. He looked everywhere, and there was nothing, just the pop I had dropped on the floor. I left that week, and we broke up shortly after. Fast forward a few years and I live with my new boyfriend in a brand new apartment. I had a daughter and she was about 7 or 8 months old and just learning to say a few words. Everything was going well except for a few strange things here and there, but nothing major had happened. Yet, anyway. It was my daughter's bath time, so we were in the bathroom playing in the water, having a good time. Out of nowhere, she looks right past me and smiles and starts waving at something. Now I know what you're thinking. My boyfriend probably walked by the bathroom door and she was smiling at him. Me and my daughter were the only ones there. Chills ran down my spine and I got very uncomfortable. Being creeped out, I cut bath time early, got her dressed and put her to bed. About 10 minutes after she was put down, I heard her start to giggle and saying hello. Needless to say, I took her out of her room and she slept with me that night. For about a month, nothing really happened. It was nice and peaceful. After that, it started up again. I was in my bed sleeping, and I woke up out of a deep sleep. I looked over to see my huge mirror that was on top of my dresser leaning forward ever so slightly, then start to fall towards my bed. This dresser's at the foot of my bed, by the way. I pulled my feet up towards me just before the mirror hit my bed. About 5 seconds later, my old heavy-ass TV flipped onto the bed, too. This TV takes 2 people to lift. We didn't end up living there much longer. A couple months later, me and my daughter moved back into my parents' house. This is where I'm currently living. Things are still happening. Just the other day, while I was washing some dishes, I felt very uneasy and kept looking behind me, expecting to see someone. I turned back to the sink, and just as I did, it felt like someone had jumped on the floor right behind me. It's hard to explain. There was no sound, but I could feel the vibration of it, like when someone drops something heavy and you can feel the impact on the floor. I know I probably sound crazy, but believe me, this is all real. This is just a few of the things that have happened to me since I lived with Sam. I think that whatever it was at Sam's house has followed me. I'm 21 now, and this thing is still following me. My frightening encounter with a cop. I'd like to start off this encounter with a little personal background. Once, usually every other month, my family and I take a road trip from New Orleans to San Antonio, and then from San Antonio to Tulsa to visit grandparents. This drive is usually a piece of cake as you pass through many towns along the way. So here comes Christmas 2015, and it's time to make this journey once more. I was glad we were going to see our parents again, and my wife and the kids get to see their grandparents. I have 2 kids, Tyler and Margot, aged 3 and 6. Margot is a factor in this event, but I'll get to that later. We get the unfortunate news that my wife's parents' house has been flooded, and they didn't want us to come. We wanted to help anyway, but they insisted that we go to my parents' house first and maybe come over to their house after. We reluctantly agreed, and then we began the familiar 10-hour journey from New Orleans to Tulsa. Fast forward about 4 hours. We made the mistake of leaving around 7 p.m. We're on Texas 77 heading to Atlanta, Texas for a break and a bite to eat. And let me tell you something, traveling on a secluded road late at night is fucking horrible. In particular, Texas 77 turns and turns and you have to pay attention. We hadn't seen a car for miles, and it all was really kind of terrifying in and of itself. Shit didn't creep out until here. We were about 40 minutes from Atlanta. We see what appears to be a police car quite some distance in back of us, which is strange in and of itself, as we didn't see any other cars anywhere. We didn't really think much of it. We thought it was a little odd in the middle of the night, but not creepy yet. It follows right behind us for a little bit, as we checked we weren't doing anything wrong. It escalated when he put his sirens and lights on, and as we pulled over, he got out and came to my window. Then the following happened. Is there a problem, officer?
Your license plate fell off.
Are these your children?
Your daughter is very beautiful. Is she for sale?
Excuse me?
Is she for sale? I'll take good care of her.
Can I see your badge?
Yes, sir.
He didn't show me his badge. He pulled out his pistol.
Give me your girl.
I'm sorry, officer, hold on. I pretend to reach for her as I nope the fuck out of there. We go full speed on this little state road for as long as we could. Thankfully, the car didn't follow us. We finally got to a Pizza Hut and decided to seek some refuge there for a few minutes. We tell the waitstaff about the encounter and have no clue as to who it could have been. With no answers, we found a motel and stopped for the night. I parked in the back. I'm so thankful it ended there and he didn't follow us. It frightens me to think about how it could have ended, and although I deeply wish it never happened, I'm glad it ended safely. By the way, we did in fact inform the police, but we're unsure whether things got off the ground with them. They were just as confused and creeped out as we were. This happened last year around December when I was 17. Me and my friends were getting together to throw a party, and it was supposed to be an outside party. One of my friends decided we should have it in some nearby woods. At the time, I didn't see a problem with it at all. On the way there, we started making calls to make sure everyone was coming, and when we finally got there, it felt like someone or something was watching me. I just shook it off. A couple of minutes went by, and people started showing up. While in the middle of the party, I still couldn't get over the feeling that like something was watching us and didn't want us there. This time, I let the guys know I didn't feel so good about this and we should go. But instead, they wanted to move the party back to my place. While in this whole mix, I saw something that made me almost shit my pants. Behind one of my friends, there was a woman there. Now, this woman was wearing clothes that looked like they dated back to the 80s. She walked up to us and asked if we could help find her baby. We split up into groups of threes, and guess who got stuck with the creepy-ass lady? Yeah, you know. Now, I hope I wasn't imagining things, because there was this crying somewhere out in the distance, and as we got closer to it, the more scared I got. And when we finally reached the place where the sound was coming from, I turned around and noticed the woman had disappeared. Now, I'm not stupid, but I was confused by this whole thing until it hit me. The woman didn't have any reason to be in the woods in the middle of December at night. The woman had no reason to approach a bunch of teenagers, and how the hell did she lose her baby? And why was she wearing 80s clothes? Hey, we know what we saw, and we hope we don't ever see it again. My Little Psycho Girl. It was my 18th birthday, and as a newly minted adult, I was enjoying my grown-upness by getting as drunk as I could. I'm with my friends in this pub in town, and we're gathered around a table. There's maybe 6 of us. A couple of tables over, there's a group of girls, and there's maybe 6 of them. One of them catches my eye, and when I look over, she's stunning. Long, red hair, bright blue eyes, just gorgeous. I look away and carry on drinking, but she keeps catching my eye again and again throughout the night. We do that thing where you both catch each other looking and then pretend you weren't looking at all whilst doing it even more. Eventually, I needed another drink, so I got up and head to the bar, and I noticed her doing the same. At this point, I notice that she's short, has a great figure, and I'm pretty much fully in lust with this girl. We've not even met. We get to the bar, and I let her order before me. She gets something like a lemonade. Unusual for the pub, but I figured someone's got to be the designated driver, and it's probably her. I order a pint for myself, turn around to head back, and she's there, right behind me. We get to chatting, and she tells me her name's Helena, and I make some kind of Shakespeare joke, and she laughs, and I know I'm in. The rest of the night I talk mostly to her, though it's cool because the other lads have descended on the group of girls at the other table. The evening wears on, and eventually we get to the, well, are we going to fuck or just agree to meet each other again, or pretend this never happened stage? We go for the former. We go back to my place, being very careful not to wake up my parents because I was still living at home at the time, and man, did we have a great night. Long story short, we ended up going out for a while, but always meeting out somewhere, then heading back to my place. Eventually, we drift into actually being a couple, and from there we start to do more couple-y-type things. And that's when the crazy leaks in. She starts arguing with me about every little thing imaginable, from not saying hello in the right way to not being there to wake her up at precisely 6:01 in the morning or whatever. Every argument escalates into whatever the hell she's decided to rant about and always ends up the same way. She threatens to dump me, I coax her back, we kiss, have sex, everybody's happy. After maybe a month and a half or so of this, I get bored of it all. So I do the decent thing and take her out for coffee to a cozy little cafe. I tell her in the best way that I just don't think we're working out, and shockingly, it's all pretty surprisingly amicable. Except it's not. The phone calls start. At first to my mobile, then to my home phone. Always from a private number, always crying. I know she's faking it, because if I never answered the phone, my parents would have a friendly little chat, then hand the phone to me, and immediately it's like Niagara Falls of tears. Then the emails. weird, ranty emails of gibberish and threats and pleading to take me back. Hundreds of them. There'd be days when they'd come every 5 minutes, and there would be days where there'd be nothing at all. I changed my mobile number to get rid of her, and my home phone, we went to the X directory with the number. Changed my email, too. I still got them for about 6 months after that, but eventually they stopped. And that should have been the end of it. Little did I know, it was far from over. I started going online on various forums, games, etc., and on one such forum I struck up a friendship with a girl on there. I knew she was a girl because she showed me pictures of herself and little scribbled, "Hi, I'm random username," and whatever, which is pretty conclusive as evidence goes. At least it was when I was 18. We had a great time chatting and whatever, and we had so much in common, it was kind of insane. Not only did she like the same things I did, but she was this utterly stunning little brunette, like a proper English rose. Anyway, eventually we started going out online, having little Skype chats, though she never went on cam, which I was cool with because I kind of looked like hell a lot of the time back then. Things started out well, but over time she got a little bit too clingy for my liking. She'd ask where I'd been if I was a minute late, or got jealous if she'd seen a picture of me on Facebook with another girl. She got upset at the slightest things, or angry if I mentioned another girl's name, even if it was, "Oh, Louise said she liked my work," when Louise was the lecturer for my English course. Eventually, I got pissed off, dumped her, and we had a nice clean break. I avoided those forums, changed my Skype because remember, I'd bad times with the previous ex, and that was that. Not learning my lesson at all, I went on to different forums, found another girl, got to know her too. This one was a tan, blonde, gorgeous with a sexy as hell Australian accent. She liked most of the same things I did, with enough difference that we could talk to each other about how to look at things differently and how to appreciate things differently, and how to just like things that we had never considered liking before. She was laid back, too, and compared to the last two exes, she was a breath of fresh air. If I got on Skype half an hour late, and I said I would be there, she was cool with it. If I spent a conversation talking about my lecturer, using her name every other dozen words, she'd bitch along with me, making me laugh and making me smile. Eventually, I talked of meeting her, though it was a long way from England to Sydney, and expensive as all hell. I was willing to fly to meet her because I really wanted to see her face to face, to see the places that she told me about, to go to the clubs and bars and restaurants she told me she loved. I wanted to hold her in my arms, really kiss her for real and actually have a proper girlfriend. She immediately broke up with me, saying I'd only be disappointed with the reality. Then came the latest girl. She was a Canadian, brunette, something of a rock chick, completely different to my usual kind of girl. We met on some chat site I used when I was bored, got to talking, swapped some details, so on. She introduced me to a ton of music I'd never even considered listening to, and I did the same for her. If I complained about something, she told me to man the fuck up. If I turned up late, she told me it was fine because time is something the man makes us believe in. She was like the coolest fucking girl I'd ever met. Again, we dated on Skype and whatever, and again we talked about meeting, and this girl also broke up with me, saying that it had all just been fun or whatever. She wasn't really serious about the relationship. I thought it was okay, it was cool. Again, it was amicable, and fine, that was that. All of this had happened over a couple of years, with me being with each girl and from anywhere between 4 and 6 months, and my between times being maybe 1 to 2 months. I was a quick worker, and I didn't mess around with the rebound shit. Anyway, I came back to my hometown for the holiday. I think it was Reading Week, or something like that, and the hell with being on campus then. I was wandering along the road when, who should I see but my original psycho girl? Rather than avoiding her, I carried on walking. She came up to me and said she had something to tell me and we really needed to talk. I made all kinds of excuses because I didn't want to be anywhere near this bitch, but each of my excuses she batted aside until she wore me down. We went to the pub and she told me something that basically terrified me. She hadn't wanted to give up on me, so she'd used what she knew of me to find the places I'd go online. She'd made different accounts, lots of different accounts, in the hopes that she'd find me so she could talk to me, try to win me back. Except she'd made fake accounts so I wouldn't immediately ignore her. You see where this is going? Yeah, every one of the girls I dated online had been her. Using pictures of her friends, using fake accents, pretending to not know things she knew. She followed me across at least a dozen different websites, stalked me across hundreds of posts and threads, and all the time had made me believe that I was talking to completely different people. I didn't date anyone for a couple of years after that. I don't know what came of her after that, but she sort of just disappeared from my life, and I haven't seen her since. I went out briefly with a couple of other girls, but only ones I'd met face to face who didn't look anything like her at all. I'll never know if she still follows me about online, and if she does, she probably knows about this account too, so if you're looking at this, hello Helena, please go the fuck away. Home invasion. Recently, my cousin Charlie was allowed to sleep over, which he wasn't allowed to do often as he always had to look after his younger sisters. My parents were out, so it would just be me, Charlie, and my younger brother Grady, who was 8. Grady stayed upstairs while Charlie was here, as I had made a deal with him that he could stay awake as long as he wanted, just as long as he left me and Charlie alone. So, Grady stayed in his room all night. Me and Charlie did the usual stuff, eating food, watching movies, playing video games, normal boy stuff. At around 12:30 a.m., Charlie was fast asleep on the long sofa, as we were sleeping in the living room. Since he was taller, he got the bigger sofa, leaving me with the small, uncomfortable sofa. After a while, I realized I wasn't going to be able to sleep anytime soon, so I turned the TV back on to see if there was anything to watch. Nothing too great, really. The back door leading to my garden was connected to the living room. It had glass windows on it, so I could easily look outside, if it wasn't so dark, and if I hadn't closed the blinds that covered the door. After about a half hour of watching TV, I began to hear light taps on the back door window. I thought nothing of it, probably just the wind. After a while, the tapping stopped, to my relief, and I just lied there until I began drifting off to sleep. I was awoken by a gentle breeze, and I lifted up slightly, wondering where the sudden cold was coming from, until, to my horror, I looked over to the back door that was now open, and the blinds had been forcibly pulled off from the ceiling. I began to realize that I hadn't locked the back door earlier. I crept over to Charlie and quietly shook him awake. "Charlie, Charlie," I whispered, hoping not to notify whoever was in the house that I was awake. After a short while, he slowly lifted up and batted his eyelids. I covered his mouth so he didn't make a noise. "There's someone in the house," I whispered to him. The panic was clear in my voice. We both got up and slowly tiptoed up the stairs. I began to regret not grabbing a kitchen knife, or any weapon, in fact, to defend myself. First off, we looked into my little brother's room. The room was only illuminated by his screen. He was fast asleep. We checked the bathroom, no one there either. We then walked over to my parents' room. Charlie put on the flashlight on his phone and we walked in. We investigated the room using the flashlight to light up wherever we needed to look. However, my heart stopped as I heard the door behind us creak open, and in a split second me and Charlie dropped to the floor and snuck under my parents' bed. The sheets covered the bottom of the bed so we couldn't be seen, and I began to pant wildly. Charlie nudged me and put his hand over my mouth to stop me from making any noise, and we both began panicking even more as we heard heavy footsteps walking through the room. I couldn't control my breathing, and now neither could Charlie. We hoped my parents would get home early, or that whoever was in the house would leave before then, but whoever it was, they didn't. They walked closer to the bed, and my heart rushed to my throat as the footsteps stopped. Charlie peeked under the sheet that blocked our view. He quickly got closer back to me and whispered, "He is right there." I was truly scared for my life as I began to hear the floorboards creak, as the man bent down on one knee. We could see his hands on the sheet. He was ready to pull it up, but for some reason, he let go and walked away from the bed. We heard him walking down the stairs, and then we realized the door was knocking. And as we emerged from under the bed and went to look outside of my little brother's bedroom window, we saw the blue lights of a police car flashing. We only later found out that our neighbors had been smoking there in the back garden when they realized someone had climbed over our back gate and walked into our house. That's when they called the police. After a check of the premises, the police made it clear the man was gone. I could tell Charlie felt relieved, but I just couldn't keep thinking about what would have happened if our neighbors hadn't decided to have a smoke that night. The Desert Creature. I was stationed at 29 Palms in the 1970s, and one night a friend and I went driving into the desert towards Joshua Tree National Monument. We were just enjoying the cool night air and we were having an animated conversation when suddenly a loud, repeated knock hit the driver's side door. I thought perhaps I'd hit a small animal and its carcass was flung onto my door, so I pulled over and got out of the car and checked the door. There was nothing there. No dead animal in the road, nothing. We continued driving a few miles down the road and the same noise hit the car door, but this time it was on the passenger side. My friend began to get nervous, but I still thought it was car-related. Perhaps I'd had a blowout and been driving on a flat tire which lost tread. I stopped again and checked all the tires and doors. Nothing. I started driving again and suddenly the car just went dead in the road. The lights went off and the car slowed until I stopped it out of fear, in the middle of the road. My friend and I just sat there, frightened, and when the car suddenly started up, the lights came back on. By the way, it was a 1973 LTD, and there, crouched on the side of the road, on the passenger side, was some kind of creature. It looked like a Hollywood movie creature, a mixture of dog and oversized head like a howling werewolf. We both screamed and I hit the gas. The thing stood up on its hind legs and ran across the road. Almost 20 years later, I found myself going back to school, and a biology professor I had mentioned cryptozoology, and I told him my story. He was a collector of folk tales and told me of the Nahual of the southwestern desert. I don't know what I saw, but my professor said such a creature has been reported many times. I was very young at the time, and the experience frightened me so badly that I never went driving in the desert again. My scariest childhood memory. Have you ever gone somewhere and left to discover no one was there anymore? This happened around April of 2014. I was in my basement playing NHL 14 and had been playing for hours every day and even won a championship tournament. My mom eventually got angry and was telling me to get off the computer and start making up for chores that I had been procrastinating. Eventually, my dad stepped in. "You either do 2,000 on the rowing machine or you go to your brother's Boy Scout camp," he said. I hated the rowing machine. It was good, really, for working out, and it got me really strong, but I guess I was just too lazy that day. I felt that I should go support my brother, so I said I would go there. We left about 5 minutes after that. I brought my portable charger so I could look at iFunny. We arrived at the Boy Scout place called the DFRC. It brought back so many memories. I was a scout when I was little, and I remember playing with my friends and getting in trouble there. I sat and watched my brother get different awards before the party that they were going to hold, and man, it was so boring. I decided to walk up to the radio house as there was Wi-Fi there. I sat inside, and even though it was kind of creepy, I sat there anyway looking at my iFunny. Eventually, I fell asleep, which was a poor decision. I woke up at about 1:30 in the morning. I put my phone in my pocket and rushed to the door because I'm afraid of being alone in dark rooms, so that's why I ran out of there. And this next part I remember so clearly, like it was yesterday. I opened up the door to pitch black skies. Almost no light except for 2 night lamps with dim lights shining onto the road. I slowly walked down the dark road to the main building, looking all around to make sure I wasn't being followed at the same time. Yeah, I know, I'm extremely paranoid because I like to listen to scary stories too. I expected there to be cars out in front of the building and adults talking, but I came to my senses when I noticed absolutely no one was there. I ran towards the main road, the place that felt the most human in that empty area. I pulled out my phone and looked at the recent section. I got around 30 calls from my mother. No voicemail for some reason. Coincidentally, the phone started to vibrate and went to the incoming call screen. The number was my mother's number. I picked it up. "Mom, where is everyone? Did you just leave me here? I'm so scared right now," I screamed to the phone. I waited for a response and called out, "Mom! Mom!" a few times. And about 10 seconds later, I heard breathing. And then, hello? You are scared, aren't you? Why don't you wait there? I will pick you up. Where are you exactly? It wasn't my mother's voice. It was a low, raspy voice. Who is this? Do you know where everyone went? I asked. I am John. My name is John, and I don't know where they went. I kind of trusted whoever this was on the call because they responded with their name, so I told them my location. After thinking for a second, I realized how much of a bad idea that was, and I just remembered that this person was using a fake caller ID. It was supposed to be my mom's phone number, which I don't even know how they got. I felt fear rushing through my body. What was I thinking? Why did I tell that person where I was? I called my mom right away and she picked up. Alec, where are you? I was so worried. I called the cops to search for you 30 seconds ago. Mom, I'm sorry. I'm at the DFRC. Just go right away. Some creepy guy called and I wasn't thinking and I told him where I was. You what? Alec, hide right now. I will be there in 15 minutes, yelled my mom as she cut me off. I screamed back okay, and I ran and hid. I fumbled with my phone as I tried to dial 911 because I was so afraid. I eventually got the cops and they said they would arrive. I hung up not thinking. Suddenly I noticed an SUV drive into the area. I thought it was my mom, so I started to show myself, but then I quickly realized that someone was shining a flashlight out the window and searching. So I hid back again. He kept calling, "Hey!" It's John. I tried to cover up my breathing because I was super loud. He drove up and down the road and eventually stopped and got out. He walked around searching with his flashlight. I didn't get a look at his face, and I was hiding in a trench, looking like, hoping that he would never find me. He came very close to finding me, though. Then suddenly another car pulled in. He slowly walked back to his SUV so the person who pulled in wouldn't notice anything. He drove away from the camp. My mom texted me and I slowly rose up. The cops arrived just after this guy had left, and I ran up to the cops and said that he had just pulled out. One of the two groups of cops hopped into their car and tried to find him, and the others stayed to make sure I wasn't the guy that I had called in on. My mom was there to prove that I wasn't that person. The cops had a talk with us and I had to explain it all to my mother. I still don't know how he knew my mother's number, and I still haven't heard anything ever since. That was probably the scariest experience of my life so far. And I can say this, I'd rather do the 2,000 rows because I'm never going back to the DFRC. I do not mess with Ouija boards. First, a little background. The elementary school I went to was haunted. Actually, a lot of places around the whole neighborhood are haunted in some way. I don't know the whole history, just that the neighborhood is pretty old. So when I was about 10 years old, I was at a friend's house after school. Girls can be stupid, and her and another friend and myself thought we were cool going home to her house and her parents weren't there. She was a latchkey kid, so she would pretend we were visiting her at her house. So we show up after school one day, and we started playing in her older sister's clothes and stuff. Her sister was like a senior in high school, and we all looked up to her. My friend comes up with the grand idea that we should play with a Ouija board. I had no idea what that was, and I was kind of stoked. So she gets it out, and we sit down and start to play. Now the planchette starts moving, and I thought the other girls were moving it, so I play along, roll my eyes, whatever, right? Well, I take my hands off, and the other two girls start to argue who's moving the planchette. You know, stop moving it, I'm not moving it, you're moving it, that whole kind of thing. So it spells out I'm here or something, and they both get scared. I thought it was a load of bullshit myself. Then my friend, I'll call her Jay, just picks up the board and puts it away. She's near tears now. So we're just sitting there cross-legged on the floor when we hear a crunchy sound. In her and her sister's room, they had this really tall bookshelf, about 7 feet tall, maybe even taller. On top of this were her sister's pom-poms and various other trophies and medals and the things that she had won cheerleading. So we hear the crunchy sound again, and it was the pom-pom moving around. Then, while we look up onto the bookshelf, the pom-pom crunches again and then slowly floats to the floor. Yeah, I'm getting goosebumps just remembering this. Well, we all ran out of the house screaming, and just played outside till her parents got home. Skip ahead a few months and I spend the night at my friend B's house. Her older sister also had a Ouija board. Jeez, this must have been a trend back then. So we had a few girls there, and because a bunch of 10-year-old girls with no supervision can be stupid again, we play with the board. So we get this girl named Nikki. She's like 15 and died in a car crash. At least that's what the board is telling us. She's just talking to us, and I don't really remember the whole conversation, but she did say she liked being around us girls. Well, we said goodbye and stuff, but some of the girls are so spooked they want to go home. So they did. Yeah, every parent loves that 1 a.m. phone call where they need to come pick up their kid. So now there's only like 3 or 4 of us left. And all night there was something in the room with us. Whatever it was, it kept passing in front of the light coming from the stereo. We were all accounted for, so we had a lovely night of, "Did you see that?" And I didn't go to sleep until I went home in the morning. So later on, I'm still 10 years old, and our 5th grade class was having its Halloween party. We had this contest that we had to eat apples tied to a string hanging from the ceiling. So there were a few apples still hanging when my teacher decided everyone should go outside to play. My friend B brought the damn Ouija board to school and left it on her desk. A boy in my class, I'll call H, decided it would be a grand idea to play it while everyone went outside. So he picks me, and I play it with him again. Yeah, I know, I'm a genius. We started playing, and it's not spelling anything, just random letters, and it kept going to goodbye. So, bored, we decided to go outside with the rest of the class. Mind you, the teacher isn't even in the classroom. When we stood up and turned around, the remaining apples still attached to strings to the ceiling were swinging, and to top off that, there was a stack of health books on a table to the left of us, and the book on the very top just slides off the pile and slams on the floor. We bolted out of there, and at that moment I decided never to touch a Ouija board again. Why I'm afraid of the dark. I was about 7 or 8 when this happened. I lived with my dad in a 3-bedroom house, and we made the spare bedroom into a little office. So one day my dad was in the office, and I was in the living room watching TV. Dinner time comes around, and me and my dad are in the kitchen, and we heard someone knock at the door. My dad goes to the door and looks, and there's no one out there. He closes the door, and someone knocks again, and my dad looked out the peephole, and again no one was there. He walks away, and someone knocks again, and we just ignore it. For the next hour and a half, that's all we heard at the door. My dad finally gave up being patient, and as he walked to the door, all the power in the house went out. I started to freak out a little, and my dad told me to go upstairs and get his gun. So I'm walking up the stairs as fast as I can, and I get to the top of the steps, and there is a dark, shadowy figure standing in where my dad's doorway is to his bedroom. I screamed as loud as possible, and my dad ran up the steps, and the man was gone. I was frozen in fear. Thank God our neighbor was home and heard me scream. He called the cops, and I told the cops what happened, and they caught the guys about 3 miles down the road. Yeah, I said guys. The cops said there were 7 of them, all of which were hiding on the roof, and the man that I saw snuck in through our office window somehow. So creepy guy that was in my house and scared the living shit out of me, thanks for the 4 years of therapy, and let's never meet again. Some detail for a good mental image. I live in a massive subdivision that surrounds a bunch of woods affectionately referred to as the trails. I suppose the people who own it left it untouched in case they wanted to add more streets. Anyway, I live down the street from one of the main entrances that most people use and or know of. My friends and I were a resilient bunch who like to go out there and have fires, get drunk and smoke a little if you know what I mean. So considering we were out there so much, we decided we were going to build ourselves a little hideout or fort of sorts, where we could party and even camp. We ended up with a good small clearing off of one of the winding pads where we had set up a good-sized lean-to with some evergreen on top as our roof and named it Bear Cave. Now for the incident in question. This happened back when I was about 17 or 19 years old. I had just gotten off work and had to grab some fast food. My friends had called me earlier letting me know that we were going to meet at Bear Cave. So after I got home, I changed into some warmer clothes as this was during the late fall to early winter, and it had been unusually cold that night. So I decided I should get out there as soon as possible and decided to take my food with me and eat there. Now, it's about 8:30, and the moon was barely visible through the trees, but knowing the trail like the back of my hand, I wasn't worried and assumed they would already have a fire started. As I approached, I walked up to our hidden entrance and saw there was no fire and heard no sounds. I took my phone out and texted one of my friends asking where they were. They replied something along the lines of, "Sorry man, we're going to be about 15 minutes late." Great, I thought to myself. I ducked in and started trying to scrape together some wood and kindling and get something going. Unfortunately, everything was wet, and without a proper flashlight, as this was before they were standard on phones, I couldn't get into the brush and dig anything up. Soon after, I decided I might as well eat and hurriedly scarf down my 2 burgers. Before I knew it, I'd been sitting out there for about 20 minutes and still no sign of anybody. I tried giving a couple of them a call, and after 5 minutes with no callback, I texted them. Still no response. At this point, I was about fed up, and my phone was about to die, so I made a mental note. 10 more minutes, and I am gone. At this point, I squatted down, holding my knees to my chest, and tried getting warm. My back was to our little hut at the back of the site. I thought I heard something behind me, a slight crunch. I looked over my shoulder, and from behind the shelter, I saw what looked like 2 beady eyes glinting from the little moonlight entering through the trees. I quickly and quietly turned my full body to face it. At this point, I feel as though I'm about to throw up or just shit myself. But keeping my mind about myself, I slowly reached to my right where I had laid a stick just in case something like this might happen. If this was a dog, it was big. And let me clarify, this was not a wolf, as I live in the South, and coyotes do not get this big. Something wasn't right. It just stared, unblinking, as if through me, and made no sound whatsoever. I realized whatever this was, it wanted to come at me. Thinking fast, I decided my best interest was to throw it off guard. I threw the stick, and without seeing if it made contact, turned and ran swiftly out the entrance, expertly placing my feet in all the safe places through the trail, assuring I wouldn't trip, and maintaining maximum speed. I didn't stop till I saw streetlights and was safely on the road. About this time, I see my friends pulling up, and I told them that I just saw something. They didn't seem too interested and tried to still go out. I told them sternly no and suggested we go to my house. This seemed suitable to them, and so that's where we went. I still don't know what I saw out there, and it was as if though everybody else forgot about it. I continue to go back out there, but only at daytime, or if at night with a friend. But I will never forget those unwavering eyes. I'm the kind of person who, it seems, has a lot of weird things happen to them, and this is one of the many things that I have remembered in my life. When I was a junior in high school, my mom and dad got a divorce, and since me and my mom didn't really get along well, I decided to move in with my dad. We moved into a house in the town over from where my mom was, and we got a cute little white house in a nice, quiet neighborhood, and the last neighborhood I lived in was kind of noisy and grubby, so I was pretty happy. We didn't have a lot of furniture except our beds and some blankets and dishes that we had delivered about a week earlier. The house had 3 bedrooms in all. One was downstairs, and my dad used it for a study, and the other 2 upstairs were mine and his. He thought it would be a good idea if I invited a friend over to keep me company because he would be out working and taking care of the rest of the moving stuff. So I invited my friend Kara, that's not her real name, over to stay with me. It was a Thursday night and my dad was out. It was pretty late and me and Kara decided to go up to my room and hang up some posters and stuff, and I told her I'd get started while she took a shower, and this is when things got creepy. While she was in the shower, I decided to close my door because I didn't want to look out into the dark hallway. About 5 minutes had passed, and all of a sudden I heard my bedroom doorknob rattling, and then there was banging on the door. It scared the shit out of me. I got kind of mad because I thought, why couldn't she just wait? She doesn't have to bang on the door like that, so I opened the door, and no one was there. I stepped out and still heard the shower going at the end of the hall, so I closed my door again, and as soon as I did, the banging started all over. I opened it, and again, no one was there. I thought my friend was playing a joke on me, so I went into the bathroom, got out my dad's shaving cream, opened the curtain, and sprayed her with it. She yelled and asked me what the fuck I was doing, and I told her what had happened, and she swore it wasn't her. She told me to stand outside the door and she'd hurry up and get dressed. After she did, we went back into my room and we left the door open a crack this time. We were almost done with hanging the posters and putting objects around in the room when the door just busted open so hard it hit the wall behind it. My friend and I looked at each other from my bed and I grabbed her hand, and then we ran down the hall, down the stairs, and out the door. It's been almost a year since I lived there, and I live with my mom now, and when Kara and I hang out, it's usually at her house.
My dad lives in Pennsylvania because of his business, but he never said anything about the strangeness that we experienced in that cute little white house.
How I found out I was a medium. First off, I am a 38-year-old female, but this all happened to me when I was a child. For a little backstory, the women in my family have always been psychic, and I was no exception. When I was 9 or 10, my grandmother, who lived with us, needed to be moved from the basement bedroom to the one on the main level because of knee surgery. This meant I had to move down to the basement, and this was also where my brother's room was, and he wasn't so happy about having me come down there. Now this is where the story really starts. I had only been downstairs for about a week, and I thought I saw my brother going around the corner to the bathroom. I really didn't think that much about it until I went upstairs and saw my brother sitting at the kitchen table eating a snack. I then asked, "Weren't you just downstairs in the bathroom?" He answered no, so I just shrugged it off as my mind may be playing tricks on me. About a month goes by and everything was normal. Then I was down getting something from the basement and I saw a man in the bathroom. I screamed and ran up the stairs like a shot. I told my mom what I saw and she said, "It's okay, don't worry about it, everything is okay." So I put it out of my mind. Another 3 months go by when I see him again, and this time I also hear him laughing, this high-pitched cackle. I freaked out, started to cry, and ran for the stairs again. Now my mom knew what I had seen, and again she told me, "Don't worry, he won't hurt you." That was when my mom told me his name was Adam, and he was a guide and spirit friend. So the next time you see him and he tries to chase you, just stand your ground and see if he doesn't change his tune, she told me in her Midwestern way. About another 6 months went by before I saw him again, and he saw me too. He started to cackle his cackle, and I started to cry, but this time I didn't run. I just stood there crying, and then his face softened, and he spoke to me for the first time.
Shh. It's okay. I'm sorry. I was just playing with you. Just relax. Stop crying.
I then stopped crying and said, "Well, why did you chase me?" Right then my brother walks down the stairs and says, "Who are you talking to?" I looked back, and the man was gone. That was how I found out I was a medium.
Some weird experiences in Melbourne, Australia. My first story was about 6 or 7 years ago in a place not far from Melbourne called the Black Forest. That night I was traveling in my car with my cousin James, and as we approached the Black Forest, we decided to stop in it just for getting a creepy experience and some fun. I was driving and we saw a distinct entrance into it. Because there are a few, we decided to take this first one. It had a road that went straight on, a resting area on the right, and a road going left, which we decided to take deeper into the forest. We went down it for about 800 meters and turned onto another small road. It was so dark, the trees were closed in above us, hence the name the Black Forest. I got worried and decided to turn the car around for a quick exit just in case we got too scared. I stopped the engine and turned off the headlights. We literally couldn't see our hands in front of us. We sat for about 30 seconds and then decided it was far too scary because of the little sounds around the car, so I drove forward out of the small road and out to where there was moonlight again, and back onto the main road where we'd come from. I had my window down a little bit, and then suddenly decided to turn the engine off again. The radio was on softly as we talked about the darkness of the road we had just been on. And suddenly I heard a noise from behind the car and to the right. I turned down the radio and said to James, "Can you hear that?" As I said it, I looked to where the sound was coming from. He didn't hear the sound. But there was a clearing beside us, and a fence that followed the edge of the clearing that lined the heavily treed area to that side of the car. The clearing went on for about 15 meters beside us, up to that fence. I saw the bottom branch of a pine tree, a very thick branch, being vigorously shaken up and down by something. I saw a shadow of a straight leg underneath it that moved slightly, and I thought, even a strong man would struggle to make a branch of that size move like that, and if someone did shake it like that, they would have to be moving a lot more than just standing there from what I had seen. Within a second of seeing it, I had started the car and put my foot to the floor, nearly losing control as James suggested pulling my foot from the accelerator to gain control. I was doing that anyway because there was no way I wanted to be stranded there. He kept asking me what I had seen, but I didn't know. We got to the side of the highway again and I stopped. James wanted to go back and see what I had saw, but my instincts kicked in and said hell would freeze over before I was going to go back and look at that thing. There were no houses anywhere near the area where we had been. There was no reason why anyone would stop and walk down to that clearing by the fence and do that to a tree for any reason. And if that wasn't bad enough, we did try to find that same place about a month after we had been there. We found the entrance that had the road going straight ahead, the resting area to the right, and the road to the left, and no other entrance had those things. But there was no clearing, there was no fence anymore. We had no idea how to explain that, and I'm scared now just thinking about it. My second weird occurrence was on a bushwalk just on the outskirts of the Melbourne suburbs. I had come to this area many times to walk on it, and I knew the area quite well. And this one day, it was about an hour before dark, so I walked my normal path. And about 20 minutes had passed, so I decided to go back before it got darker. I had walked the normal way, seeing the normal things. I turned around and started to walk back when I seemed to be making no progress. I knew I wasn't walking in circles. I have a very good sense of direction, but I seemed to be walking the same path over and over. I'd think to myself, okay, I'll see the exit path just over this rise, but each time I would see the same sight of long, dry grass as I walked all over the rise. Another 20 minutes or so had passed, and I began to get pretty worried by then. I had thought as I began my walk that I knew I hadn't walked as far as I seemed to have gone, and I knew that I was on a familiar path. This particular day, my roommate told me to bring his phone with me because it was starting to get late in the day, and I don't think I thanked him enough for that. It got dark, and suddenly I was approaching a large building that looked like a hospital. I was unaware that a hospital existed there. It turned out to be a mental institution, and there were some nurses standing outside having a smoke. So I walked down to them uncomfortably, and they looked at me like they had no idea why I would even be walking out there. I asked for the way out, and they told me to walk down the road until I got to a dirt road that my car was parked on. I called my housemate, and I told him I was scared to death. Please, come and find me. So he did. His kids were visiting us, so they stayed on the phone with me for a few minutes after he left. I must have walked at least another kilometer before I got to the dirt road, and I was walking fast, and at some portions I was actually running. I turned and walked down it, and I would have run for about another kilometer before I had even seen my housemate's car. I had never been so glad to see anyone in my life. He drove up the other half a kilometer or so until we got to my car. I have no idea how in 20 minutes I had not only managed to walk so far that I could not have gotten back to my car in the same time frame, but I also had passed a hospital and not noticed it and walked 5 times further than I did out here. I don't really talk about this with anyone, and this maybe has been brought up with 2 friends of mine, because I know that if I do bring it up, people will just think that I got lost or walked further than I thought I did. But I know where I was going, and it was all familiar until I turned to walk back.
Hello, Uncle Josh here. Thanks for listening, and I hope you enjoyed these true scary stories from around the world. If you are interested in having your story shared on the air, please email unclejoshscarystories@gmail.com. In the subject line, please let me know the nature of your story. Also, remember to omit any real person's name that is involved in your story, and also send a short note of consent letting me know that I have your permission to share your story. Thanks again for listening. Stay tuned for more of Uncle Josh's true scary stories.